My name is Austin Grant, and for most of my life, my own family treated me like I was invisible, like I never mattered. To them, I was just there, replaceable, forgettable. But the night a wildfire swallowed half a mountain in Oregon, a team of strangers looked at me like I was the only reason they were still breathing. One of them said, "You're the greatest teacher we've ever had." And I remember thinking, how could they see something my own family never did? If this story finds you tonight, wherever you are in the world, tell me your time and place in the comments. And if you've ever felt unseen, I'd love to hear your story too. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Sometimes the stories we hide are the ones that heal us the most. I used to believe that if I just tried harder, if I gave more, did more, stayed quieter, stayed kinder, eventually my family would see me. Not just look at me, not just pass by me in the hallway or call my name when they needed something, but truly see me. That never happened. Our house in Portland was beautiful. 2 stories wide windows, polished hardwood floors that I kept spotless every single day. People who visited often said it looked like something out of a magazine. What they didn't see was how empty it felt when the doors closed and it was just the 4 of us again. Richard Grant. My husband of 32 years was the kind of man people respected the moment he walked into a room. Confident, sharp, always in control. He ran a successful consulting firm downtown, wore tailored suits even on casual Fridays, and spoke in a tone that made people listen. I used to admire that about him. I used to think being beside someone like him meant I mattered too. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being his partner and became something closer to a background detail. You wouldn't understand, he'd say, not even looking at me whenever I asked about his work. At first, it didn't bother me. I told myself we had different roles. He built the world outside. I kept the world inside running. That was enough, or at least that's what I convinced myself. Our son Daniel followed in his father's footsteps. He was a lawyer now, sharp, ambitious, always busy. He spoke fast, thought faster, and rarely had patience for anything he considered unnecessary. Our son Daniel followed in his father's footsteps. He was a lawyer now, sharp, ambitious, always busy. He spoke fast, thought faster, and rarely had patience for anything he considered unnecessary. Conversations with him often felt like I was interrupting something important, even when I was just asking how his day had been. "Mom, can we not do this right now?" He'd say already, halfway out the door, phone pressed to his ear. Our daughter Emily was softer, but distant in her own way. She married young, moved into a lovely home across town, and built a life that didn't seem to have much room for me. When she visited, she hugged me politely, complimented the house, and then spent most of her time scrolling through her phone or talking about things I didn't quite belong in. "Mom, you should get out more," she once told me, smiling like she was offering advice. I remember nodding, even though I wasn't sure where I was supposed to go, because my world had been built around them. Every morning, I woke up before everyone else. I made coffee exactly the way Richard liked it, strong, no sugar. I prepared breakfast, even when no one sat down to eat it. I folded laundry, cleaned rooms that were already clean, organized spaces no one noticed. I remembered birthdays, appointments, preferences. I made sure everything ran smoothly. And yet, it was as if none of it counted. One evening, I overheard Daniel talking to a friend in the living room. He didn't know I was in the kitchen just a few steps away. "My dad built everything we have," he said. "My mom, she's just always been there, you know. Just there." The words settled into me like something heavy and permanent. Not cruel, not even angry. Just dismissive, as if my entire life could be summarized in 2 empty words. I didn't confront him. I didn't say anything at all. I just stood there, my hands still wet from the sink, staring at the reflection in the window. For a moment, I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. When had I become someone so easy to overlook? The truth is, it didn't happen all at once. It happened slowly, quietly, over years of choosing them over myself. Years of saying yes when I wanted to say no. Years of stepping back so they could step forward. And somewhere in that process, I disappeared. Richard never asked what I wanted anymore. Not because he didn't care, at least that's what I used to believe, but because it simply didn't occur to him that I might have wants of my own. "You've got everything you need," he told me once when I tried to talk about feeling restless. "A beautiful home, a comfortable life. What more could you possibly want?" I didn't have an answer for him then, but deep down, I think I knew. I wanted to matter, not in a grand, dramatic way. Not in a way that demanded attention or praise. Just in a way that meant if I disappeared, someone would notice. Someone would feel it. But in that house, I wasn't sure they would. Even small things made it clear. Dinner conversations where no one asked me a single question. Family decisions made without including me. Plans discussed as if my role was already understood. I would be there, of course, but only in the background. And I accepted it. That's the part that's hardest to admit. I accepted it because it felt easier than fighting for a place I wasn't sure they were willing to give me. So I stayed quiet. I smiled when expected. I played my role. Until the night something inside me finally broke. At the time, I didn't know that moment would lead me somewhere completely unexpected, somewhere that would force me to confront the person I used to be, and the person I still had the chance to become. But standing in that kitchen, listening to my son describe me as just there, I felt something shift. Not loud, not sudden, just a quiet, undeniable realization. Maybe the problem wasn't that I didn't matter. Maybe it was that I had been living in a place where no one had ever learned how to see me. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't where I was meant to stay. There was a time long before I became just there when people used to say my name with something that sounded like admiration. I don't think anyone in my family remembers that version of me. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined her. But then there are moments, small, sharp flashes of memory that come back so clearly they feel more real than the life I'm living now. I was 23 when I first stepped onto the training grounds in Northern California. It wasn't anything glamorous. No grand buildings or polished halls. Just open land, rough terrain, and instructors who believed that survival wasn't something you talked about. It was something you lived. I remember the first time I completed a wilderness navigation test. 48 hours alone, limited supplies, unpredictable weather. Most people struggled. Some dropped out before they even started. I finished early, not because I was stronger or smarter than everyone else, but because something in me understood it. How to listen to the wind. How to read the ground. How to stay calm when everything around you is telling you to panic. One of the instructors, a man named Carl Jensen, pulled me aside afterward. He didn't smile much, but that day I saw something close to it. "You've got instincts," he said. "Real ones. You don't hesitate. That's rare." I held on to those words for years. Back then, I was training in emergency response and wilderness survival. It wasn't a typical path for someone like me, especially not at that time. Most of the people in the program were younger, tougher, louder, but I didn't need to be any of those things. I just needed to be steady, and I was. There was a quiet confidence in me then. Not arrogance, not the kind that needed to prove anything. Just a deep, unshakable belief that I could handle whatever came my way. I was on track to become an instructor. That was the goal. To teach others how to stay alive. To guide people through fear and chaos and show them there was always a way out if you knew where to look. I can still remember the day they told me, "You're one of our top candidates," Carl said. "If you keep this up, you'll be leading your own team within a year." I drove home that evening with my heart pounding, already imagining what my future might look like. It wasn't just a job to me. It was purpose. It was meaning. It was something that belonged entirely to me. And then I met Richard. He was charming in a way that felt effortless. Confident, attentive, the kind of man who made you feel like you were the only person in the room when he spoke to you. He asked questions. He listened. He made me laugh in ways I hadn't in years. At first, he admired what I did. "That's incredible," he said when I told him about my training. "You're like something out of a movie." I remember laughing, brushing it off. But secretly, I liked the way he looked at me, like I was someone worth noticing. We got married faster than anyone expected, and for a while, it felt like I could have both him and the life I had been building. But reality has a way of quietly shifting things. It started with small comments. "Do you really want to keep doing something so dangerous?" "I just worry about you out there. You don't have to prove anything anymore, Austin." At first, it sounded like concern, love even, and maybe part of it was. But over time, those words changed. "You're going to be gone for weeks at a time. That's not how a marriage works. What about starting a family? Don't you think it's time to settle down?" I told myself I could compromise, that I could step back for a little while just until things felt more stable, just until we figured out what our life together was supposed to look like. So I deferred my instructor placement. Just 1 year, I told Carl when I called him. "I just need some time." He was quiet for a moment. "You sure about that?" he asked. "Yes," I said, even though something inside me hesitated. "I'll be back." But I never went back. 1 year turned into 2. Then Daniel was born, then Emily, and somewhere between sleepless nights and school schedules and making sure everyone else's life stayed on track, mine slowly faded into the background. I didn't notice it happening at first. Because I was busy, because I was needed, because every time I thought about going back there was always a reason not to. The kids are still too young. Things are too hectic right now. Maybe next year. Richard stopped asking about it entirely. Not in a cruel way. Just as if that part of me no longer existed. And eventually I stopped bringing it up. Years passed. The certifications expired. The contacts disappeared. The version of me that once stood confidently in the middle of uncertainty became someone who hesitated over the smallest decisions. I told myself it was worth it. That this was what love looked like. That building a family meant letting go of certain dreams. And maybe in some ways that was true. But what I didn't realize, what I refused to see, was that I hadn't just let go of a career. I had let go of myself. And the worst part, no one noticed. No one said, "Austin, you gave up something important." No one said, "Thank you." Instead, over time, the story changed. In their version, I wasn't someone who had chosen to step away. I was someone who had never been capable in the first place. "You never really did anything serious," Richard once said casually during a conversation about Daniel's career. I remember standing there holding a glass of water, feeling something twist inside me, because I knew that wasn't true. But I had been silent for so long, I didn't know how to correct it anymore. And so the lie became reality. Not just for them, for me. Until that night in the kitchen, hearing Daniel say I was just there. But I had been silent for so long, I didn't know how to correct it anymore. And so the lie became reality. Not just for them, for me. Until that night in the kitchen, hearing Daniel say I was just there, something in me finally cracked open. Because for the first time in years, I remembered not just what I used to do, but who I used to be. And the realization was almost unbearable, because it meant the woman they saw wasn't all I was. She was just the version of me that had been left behind after everything else was stripped away. And if that was true, then somewhere buried under years of silence and sacrifice, the real me was still there, waiting. The night everything finally broke didn't begin with shouting. That would have been easier. It began with laughter. Richard's anniversary party was held in our own home, though by that point, it didn't feel like mine anymore. Caterers moved through the kitchen like they owned it, carrying trays of food I hadn't chosen. Glasses clinked in the living room, voices overlapping in polished, practiced conversations about business investments and success. I stood near the edge of it all, wearing a dress Emily had insisted I buy. "Something more modern, Mom," she had said, adjusting the fabric at my shoulders earlier that evening. "You don't want to look outdated. I had smiled then like I always did. Now, standing in a room full of people who barely noticed me, I felt exactly like that word. Outdated, unnecessary, invisible. Richard stood at the center of the room naturally. He always did, a glass of whiskey in one hand, the other resting confidently in his pocket. People leaned toward him when he spoke, laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. He thrived in that space, and I watched him from a distance, like I had done so many times before. Daniel was there too, talking with a group of colleagues near the fireplace. He looked just like his father when he smiled, sharp, self-assured. Every now and then he glanced at his phone, already half removed from the moment. Emily moved gracefully between guests, playing the perfect host's daughter. She introduced people, complimented outfits, made everything seem effortless. None of them needed me. That realization wasn't new, but that night, it felt heavier, more final. I had spent the entire day preparing for that party, even though no one had asked me to. Old habits don't disappear easily. I had woken up early, cleaned every corner of the house, arranged decorations, double-checked details. And yet, as the evening unfolded, it became clear that none of it mattered, because in their world, I didn't matter. At some point, Richard called for everyone's attention. "Can I have a moment?" he said, raising his glass slightly. The room quieted almost instantly. Of course it did. He smiled, looking around at the faces gathered in front of him. "I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight," he began. 30 years of building something meaningful, it doesn't happen alone." There were nods, murmurs of agreement. I've been fortunate to have incredible partners, colleagues and friends along the way. More nods, more smiles. Then, almost as an afterthought, his gaze shifted just briefly in my direction. And of course, Austin. He paused as if searching for the right words. I felt every pair of eyes in the room move toward me. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe he would say something kind, something that acknowledged everything I had given, something that made me feel seen. Instead, he gave a small, casual shrug. "She's always been there." A few people chuckled politely. It wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel, but it was enough. "She keeps things running," he added, taking a sip of his drink. "Makes life easier, and that's important, right?" More laughter. Light, easy, dismissive. And just like that, it was over. The conversation shifted. The room returned to its rhythm. But I didn't, because something inside me had gone completely still. I don't remember walking out of the living room. I don't remember what anyone said after that. All I remember is the sound of those words, echoing in my head. She's always been there. Just like Daniel had said. Just there. Not strong. Not capable. Not someone with a past, or a story, or a life that meant anything beyond convenience. Just there. I found myself standing in the hallway, staring at a framed photograph on the wall. It was from years ago, Richard and me younger, smiling in a way that felt almost foreign now. I stepped closer, studying the woman in that picture. She looked alive, confident, certain. I barely recognized her. "Mom!" Emily's voice pulled me back. I turned to see her standing a few feet away, her expression a mix of concern and mild irritation. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You kind of disappeared." I opened my mouth, but no words came out at first. "I just needed a moment," I said finally. She nodded, but her attention was already drifting back toward the party. "Okay. Well, don't stay gone too long. People might notice." I almost laughed at that. People might notice. The irony of it hit me so suddenly, so sharply, that I had to grip the edge of the table beside me just to steady myself. Notice what? That I wasn't there, or that I had never truly been there to begin with. "I think I'm going to step out for a bit," I said quietly. Emily frowned slightly. "Now, Mom, this is important for Dad." Of course it was. Everything was. Everything except me. "I won't be long," I said, but even as I said it, I knew that wasn't true. I walked to the front door slowly, almost expecting someone to call after me. No one did. Not Richard. Not Daniel. Not Emily. The music continued behind me. Laughter filled the air. Glasses clinked. Life went on exactly as it had before. Without me. I stepped outside the cool night air, hitting my face like a shock. For a moment, I just stood there on the porch breathing, listening, waiting. But the door behind me remained closed, and something inside me finally completely broke free. Not in a dramatic way, not with tears or shouting, just a quiet, undeniable decision. I couldn't stay there anymore. Not in that house. Not in that role. Not as the version of myself they had reduced me to. I walked to my car, my steps steady despite the storm of thoughts inside my head. My hands didn't shake as I opened the door. I didn't hesitate as I started the engine. I didn't know where I was going. That should have scared me. But instead, it felt like relief. For the first time in years, there were no expectations waiting for me at the end of the road. No roles to play. No one to disappoint. Just open space. And the faint, unfamiliar feeling of possibility. As I pulled away from the house, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. The lights were still on. The party was still going. My life as they knew it continued without interruption. And for the first time, I let it. I didn't have a destination in mind when I left. That was the strangest part. For decades, every step of my life had been planned around someone else, what Richard needed, what the kids needed, what the family expected. Even my smallest decisions had been shaped by invisible lines I didn't dare cross. But that night, there were no lines. Just an open road stretching into the dark. I drove without thinking, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind quieter than it had been in years. The city lights of Portland faded behind me, replaced by long stretches of highway and the occasional flicker of headlights passing in the opposite direction. I should have felt lost. Instead, I felt untethered, free in a way I didn't quite understand yet. The radio played softly in the background, some country song about heartbreak and starting over. I didn't recognize the artist, but the words settled into me anyway. Starting over. Was that what I was doing? I didn't know. I only knew I couldn't go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. After about an hour of driving, the landscape began to change. The buildings grew sparse, replaced by trees and uneven terrain. I hadn't realized how far I'd gone until I noticed the road narrowing, the pavement rougher beneath my tires. A sign flashed past me, something about a state forest. I slowed down slightly, my eyes adjusting to the darkness beyond the reach of my headlights. That's when I saw it. At first, it looked like a faint glow on the horizon. Subtle, almost easy to miss. But as I drove closer, the glow intensified. Orange. Unnatural. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Fire. I rolled down the window, and within seconds, I could smell it, the sharp, unmistakable scent of burning wood and dry earth. The air felt heavier, thicker, carrying with it a quiet sense of danger that most people wouldn't notice right away. But I did, because something in me recognized it instantly, not as a distant threat, but as something alive, something moving. I pulled the car over to the side of the road, my heart beginning to beat faster, not out of panic, but out of something deeper. Awareness. Instinct. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the faint flicker of flames in the distance. I could leave. I could turn around, drive back to the safety of the city, pretend I had never seen it. That would have been the sensible thing to do. The safe thing. The version of me I had become over the years, the quiet, compliant woman who avoided conflict and stayed in her place, would have chosen that without hesitation. But as I sat there, something else rose to the surface. Something older, stronger. The part of me that had once stood in the middle of unpredictable terrain and trusted her ability to survive it. The part of me that didn't run. I stepped out of the car before I could talk myself out of it. The night air was warmer now, carrying traces of smoke that drifted unevenly through the trees. In the distance, I could hear something faint, sirens maybe, or wind pushing through branches. I moved closer to the edge of the road, scanning the area. That's when I saw the car. It was partially off the side of a narrow dirt path, tilted at an awkward angle, one of its headlights still on, but flickering weakly. The front end looked damaged, as if it had swerved suddenly and lost control. My pulse quickened. Someone was inside. I didn't hesitate. I approached carefully, my eyes assessing the scene the way they used to, automatically without effort. Angle of impact, position of the vehicle, potential hazards. The fire wasn't close enough yet to reach the car, but the wind was shifting. That mattered. Everything mattered. "Hello?" I called out, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline beginning to surge through me. "Can you hear me?" A faint sound came from inside. A groan. Alive. I moved to the driver's side, peering through the window. A man in his 30s, maybe early 40s, slumped against the steering wheel. Blood on his forehead. Breathing shallow, but present. "Hey," I said firmly, tapping lightly on the glass. "Stay with me. I'm going to help you." The door was jammed. I circled to the passenger side, testing the handle. Unlocked. I pulled it open and leaned inside, the smell of smoke now stronger creeping into the car. "Can you hear me?" I repeated. His eyes fluttered open, briefly unfocused. "Don't leave," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, and I meant it, not this time. I reached across, carefully unbuckling his seatbelt, supporting his weight as best as I could. He was heavier than I expected, but my movements were precise, efficient, like my body remembered something my mind hadn't fully caught up to yet. "Okay," I murmured, more to myself than to him. "We're getting you out." I shifted my stance, bracing my legs, pulling him toward me inch by inch. It wasn't easy. The angle of the car worked against me, his weight dragging awkwardly as I tried to maneuver him through the narrow space. But I didn't stop. I couldn't, because the fire was closer now. I could hear it. A low, crackling roar that grew louder with every passing second. Finally, with one last effort, I managed to pull him out of the car. He collapsed against me, barely conscious, his arm slung over my shoulder as I steadied us both. "Stay with me," I said again. I half-dragged, half-carried him away from the vehicle, moving toward a clearer patch of ground where the trees thinned out. My breathing grew heavier, my muscles protesting the strain, but underneath it all, there was something else. Clarity. Focus. A sense of purpose I hadn't felt in decades. When we were a safe distance away, I lowered him gently to the ground, checking his pulse, his breathing, the severity of his injuries. Head trauma, possible concussion. No immediate signs of internal bleeding, but that didn't mean much. I needed help. And right on cue, the distant sound I had heard earlier grew louder. Sirens. Relief flickered through me, but I didn't step back. Not yet, because as the flashing lights approached, illuminating the trees in sharp bursts of red and blue, I realized something that made my chest tighten in a completely different way. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was ready for whatever came next. The first rescue truck arrived in a rush of noise and flashing lights, cutting through the darkness like something out of a memory I hadn't fully allowed myself to revisit. Red and blue strobes flickered across the trees, the ground, the man lying beside me. The sound of gravel crunching under heavy tires snapped everything into sharper focus. I didn't move. I didn't step back the way I might have years ago, quietly retreating to let someone else take over. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was. Because for the first time in a long time, I knew what I was doing. "Over here," I called out, raising my voice just enough to carry without panic. Two figures jumped down from the truck almost immediately, moving with urgency, but not chaos. Their gear reflected the light helmets, protective jackets, radios clipped to their shoulders. Professionals. One of them approached quickly, his eyes scanning the scene in a single sweep before landing on me. "What do we have?" he asked. His tone wasn't dismissive. It wasn't rushed in a careless way. It was direct, focused, and without thinking, I answered the way I used to. "Male mid-30s to early 40s. I said, my voice steady. "Blunt force trauma to the head." He was unconscious when I found him, responsive now, but disoriented. No visible major bleeding besides the forehead. Breathing is shallow, but stable. Possible concussion. The man paused for half a second, just long enough for something like surprise to flicker across his face. Then he nodded. "Got it," he said, already turning to sign Al the others. "Let's get him secured." The man paused for half a second, just long enough for something like surprise to flicker across his face. Then he nodded. "Got it," he said, already turning to signal the others. "Let's get him secured." Another responder, young, maybe late 20s, knelt beside me, checking the injured man with quick, practiced movements. "You've done this before?" she said quietly, glancing at me. I hesitated, for just a moment. "Not in a long time," I replied. She gave a small, almost approving nod. "Still shows?" The first man, the one who had spoken to me initially, stepped closer again. "Captain Marcus Hale," he said, extending a hand briefly before returning to the task at hand. "Austin," I said. "Just Austin. Not someone's wife, not someone's mother. Just me." "All right, Austin," Marcus said, his tone shifting slightly, including me in a way I hadn't expected. "We've got a fire moving this way. We need to clear this area fast. You able to help?" The question caught me off guard, not because I didn't know the answer, but because no one had asked me something like that in years. Able to help, Not expected, not obligated, just able. I looked past him toward the distant glow of the fire. It was brighter now, closer. The wind had shifted again, carrying sparks and ash through the air in uneven bursts. Dangerous, unpredictable, alive. And something inside me responded. Yes, I said. There was no hesitation this time. Marcus studied me for a brief second, as if weighing something. Then he nodded. Stay close, he said. And if I tell you to move, you move. Understood? Understood. The word felt natural on my tongue, familiar, like stepping into a role I had never truly stopped knowing. They worked quickly, lifting the injured man onto a stretcher, securing him with practiced efficiency. I moved with them without needing instruction, holding equipment, adjusting positioning, clearing space when needed. At one point, the younger responder, Lena Pry, heard someone call her, handed me a flashlight without even asking. Can you keep this steady? She said. I angled the beam exactly where she needed it. No explanation required. No second guessing. Just instinct. You really haven't done this in a while? She asked, a hint of curiosity in her voice. I shook my head slightly. Long time. She let out a soft breath, almost like a quiet laugh. Well, whatever you used to do, you're still better than half the volunteers we get. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. Instead, I focused on the task in front of me, because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I wasn't trying to fit into a role someone else had defined for me. I wasn't shrinking myself to make anyone else more comfortable. I was just acting, responding, existing in a way that felt honest, real. As they loaded the injured man into the back of the truck, Marcus turned to me again. You came out here alone? He asked. Yes. He frowned slightly, glancing toward the growing fire. Not exactly the safest place to be tonight. As they loaded the injured man into the back of the truck, Marcus turned to me again. You came out here alone? He asked. Yes. He frowned slightly, glancing toward the growing fire. Not exactly the safest place to be tonight. I almost smiled. I noticed. He studied me again, more carefully this time. There was something in his expression I couldn't quite place. Not judgment, not doubt. Something closer to curiosity. You saw the car and stopped? He asked. Yes. And you didn't think to wait for backup? The question wasn't accusatory, just probing. I considered it for a moment. Then I answered honestly. I didn't think there was time. He held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then he gave a slow nod. Fair enough. Behind him, one of the other responders called out. Marcus Fire's shifting east wind picked up again. Marcus turned immediately, his posture tightening. All right, we're moving out, he shouted. Everyone in. The team moved quickly, climbing back into the truck, securing equipment, checking positions. I took a step back instinctively, assuming my part in this was over, that I would return to being just someone who happened to be there. But then Marcus looked at me again. You've got a vehicle, he asked. I nodded, pointing toward where I had parked. Follow us out, he said. Stay behind the truck. Don't try to take any shortcuts. There was a pause. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, And Austin, good work. 2 simple words. But they hit me harder than anything Richard had said in years. Good work. Not invisible. Not just there. Useful. Valuable. Seen. I swallowed, a strange tightness forming in my chest. Thank you, I said quietly. As the truck pulled away, lights flashing against the dark forest, I walked back to my car, slowly, my mind struggling to keep up with everything I was feeling, because something had changed. Not out there in the fire or the chaos, but inside me. For years, I had believed that part of my life was gone, buried under responsibilities, sacrifices, and time. But tonight, it had surfaced again. Not as a memory, not as something I used to be, but as something that was still very much alive. As I started the engine and pulled onto the road behind the rescue truck, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't look invisible. I followed the rescue truck for nearly 20 minutes before we finally reached a clearing that had been turned into a temporary staging area. The moment we pulled in, the scale of what was happening became impossible to ignore. There were multiple vehicles, fire engines, emergency trucks, even a few utility vans parked in uneven rows. Floodlights had been set up, casting harsh white beams across the ground, turning night into something stark and unforgiving. The air was thick with smoke, not overwhelming yet, but constant. Lingering. Alive. People moved quickly in every direction, some carrying equipment, others speaking urgently into radios, coordinating movements I couldn't fully hear, but somehow understood. This wasn't a small incident. This was growing, and fast. I parked my car where Marcus had indicated and stepped out slowly, taking it all in. For a brief second, doubt crept in. What am I doing here? This wasn't my world anymore. It hadn't been for decades. I could still leave. No one had asked me to stay. No one expected me to be here. But before I could take another step back into that familiar place of hesitation, I heard my name. Austin. I turned to see Lena jogging toward me, her helmet slightly tilted back, a smudge of soot across her cheek. "You made it," she said, slightly out of breath. "Yeah," I replied. I wasn't sure if I should. "Good," she cut in, not unkindly. "We need all the help we can get." The words landed differently this time. Not as pressure, not as obligation, but as trust. "You okay?" she asked, studying my face more closely now. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure what I was feeling. "Just taking it in." She followed my gaze, looking out toward the distant tree line where the fire's glow pulsed against the horizon. "Its glow pulsed against the horizon. It's moving faster than expected," she said. "Wind picked up about 30 minutes ago. We're trying to get ahead of it, but—" She trailed off, shaking her head slightly. "But it's unpredictable, moving faster than expected," she said. "Wind picked up about 30 minutes ago. We're trying to get ahead of it, but—" She trailed off, shaking her head slightly. "But it's unpredictable," I finished. She glanced at me again, something like recognition flickering in her expression. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Exactly that." Before I could respond, Marcus approached his presence, cutting through the noise around us. "Austin," he said, nodding once. "Glad you followed through." There was something in his tone respect maybe that made me stand a little straighter. "What do you need?" I asked. The question came out naturally, without hesitation, without doubt. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied me again like he had before, as if trying to place something he couldn't quite name. "You said you haven't done this in a while," he said. "That's right. How long?" I hesitated. "Over 30 years. Lena let out a soft whistle under her breath. 30? She repeated. Marcus didn't react the same way. If anything, his expression grew more focused. What kind of training, he asked. Emergency response? Wilderness survival. I was on track to become an instructor. I hadn't said those words out loud in years. Not like that. Not without downplaying them. Not without apologizing for them somehow. But this time, I didn't. I just said them and let them exist. Marcus's eyes sharpened slightly. On track, he asked. I stepped away, I said simply. He didn't ask why. Not yet. Instead, he nodded once, as if filing the information away. All right, he said. Stay with Lena for now. We're organizing teams. I want to see how you move in this environment. That should have intimidated me. It should have made me second-guess everything. But instead, it grounded me. Understood, I said. Lena motioned for me to follow her, leading me toward a cluster of equipment laid out on a tarp. Don't worry, she said lightly. He does that with everyone, what I asked. The whole, I want to see how you move thing, she said with a small smile. He's not judging you. He just likes to know what people are capable of. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if that made me feel better or more aware of what was at stake. What do you need me to do? I asked. She handed me a pair of gloves and gestured toward a stack of supplies. Help me organize these, she said. We're setting up quick response C kits in case the fire jumps the line. What do you need me to do? I asked. She handed me a pair of gloves and gestured toward a stack of supplies. Help me organize these, she said. We're setting up quick response kits in case the fire jumps the line. I knelt beside her, slipping on the gloves, my hands moving instinctively as I sorted through the items, bandages, water packs, emergency blankets, basic tools. It felt familiar, not in a distant, faded way, but in a way that lived in my muscles in the way my fingers moved without needing to think. You're fast, Lena said after a moment watching me. I used to do this a lot, I replied. She tilted her head slightly. You're not rusty, she said. Not even close. I didn't know what to say to that, because part of me still felt like I was. Like I had spent too many years being someone else, someone smaller. But another part of me, the part that had pulled a man out of a car without hesitation, the part that had assessed injuries and responded without fear, knew she was right. I wasn't starting from nothing. I was remembering. Lena, a voice called from across the clearing. We need that kit ready. Coming, she shouted back. Then looked at me. Think you can finish this? I glanced down at the supplies. Yeah, I said. I've got it. She hesitated for just a second, then nodded and ran off, leaving me there. Alone, trusted. I finished assembling the kits quickly, double-checking each one without needing to remind myself why it mattered. Because I knew. Every item had a purpose. Every detail could make a difference. When I stood up, carrying the completed kits toward the designated area, I caught sight of Marcus watching from a short distance away. He didn't say anything at first, just observed. And for a moment, I felt like I was back on those training grounds all those years ago under Carl Jensen's steady, unyielding gaze. Evaluated, measured, seen. Finally, Marcus stepped forward. You're not just remembering, he said quietly. You never lost it. The certainty in his voice hit something deep inside me, something fragile, something I hadn't allowed myself to believe. I thought I did, I admitted. He shook his head slightly. No, he said. Skills like that, they don't disappear. They wait. Wait. The word lingered, because that's exactly what it felt like. Like a part of me had been waiting, not gone, not broken, just waiting for the right moment to come back. Before I could say anything else, a shout rang out from the edge of the clearing. Marcus fires, jumping the line. The entire atmosphere shifted instantly. Urgency sharpened. Voices rose. Movement accelerated. Marcus turned toward the sound, his posture changing in a way that told me everything I needed to know. This was it. This was where things got real. He looked back at me one last time. "You still sure you want to be here?" he asked. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't doubt. It was a choice. Clear, simple, mine to make. I looked past him toward the growing glow of flames pushing closer through the trees. Then I looked back at him. "Yes," I said, and this time there was no hesitation at all. The moment the words "fires jumping the lines" spread across the clearing, everything shifted from controlled urgency to something sharper, more dangerous, more real. The air itself seemed to tighten. I followed Marcus and Lena toward the edge of the staging area, where several responders had already gathered, staring into the tree line. At first I didn't see it. Then the wind changed, and suddenly flames appeared where there hadn't been any before. Not a steady wall, but scattered bursts. Small tongues of fire leaping forward, catching dry brush, racing along the ground faster than seemed possible. Spot fires, unpredictable, deadly if ignored. "It's spotting ahead of the main line," Lena said under her breath. Marcus was already speaking into his radio, his voice calm but firm. "We've got multiple spot fires east of position. Need suppression teams moving now. Priority is containment before it spreads to the ridge." His eyes flicked toward me. "Stay close," he said again. But this time it wasn't a suggestion. It was inclusion. We moved quickly, joining a small team heading toward the nearest flare-up. The ground beneath my feet was uneven dry, scattered with debris that crunched with every step. The smell of smoke was stronger here, thicker, more invasive. I pulled the gloves tighter around my hands, my senses sharpening instinctively. "Watch your footing," Lena called back to me. "Ground's unstable in some areas." "I know," I replied. And I did, because I had been here before. Not this exact place, not this exact fire, but this environment. The shifting danger, the need to stay alert, the constant calculation of risk. It wasn't new to me. It was remembered. As we approached the first spot fire, one of the responders, a broad-shouldered man named Eric, began clearing brush with a tool, creating a break to stop the fire from spreading further. "Water," someone shouted. Another responder moved in, spraying a controlled stream over the flames, knocking them down just enough for Eric to continue his work. I didn't wait for instructions. I moved to the edge of the area, scanning the ground, the trees, the direction of the wind. Then I saw it. Another ignition point, small, almost hidden beneath a cluster of dry leaves about 10 yards away. "If we don't catch that now, it'll spread," I said, quickly pointing. Lena followed my gaze immediately. "Eric's secondary spot, 10 o'clock, she shouted. He turned without hesitation. "Got it." We moved together toward the new fire, working in sync without needing to talk through every step. I grabbed a nearby tool, clearing debris away from the flames while Lena adjusted the water flow to contain it. It was fast, efficient, focused. And for a moment, everything else disappeared. No past, no family, no years of being overlooked. Just the present, just the work. "You've got a good eye," Lena said, her voice tight but impressed as the flames died down. "I used to teach this," I replied before I could stop myself. The words hung in the air for a second. Not heavy, not painful, just true. Before she could respond, another voice cut through the noise. "Marcus Weave got people up the ridge." Everything stopped. "What?" Marcus snapped, turning toward the source. A younger responder, breathless, pointed toward a higher section of the terrain. 2 hikers, their trapped fires closing in from both sides. My heart dropped. This wasn't just about containment anymore. This was about lives. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Where exactly?" he demanded. "About a 1/4 mile up narrow trail. They can't get down without running straight into the fire. This wasn't just about containment anymore. This was about lives. Marcus didn't hesitate. Where exactly? He demanded. About a quarter mile up. Narrow trail. They can't get down without running straight into the fire. Marcus turned sharply, scanning the area, calculating. All right, he said quickly. We split. Eric, you stay here and keep these spot fires under control. Lena with me, we're going up. His eyes landed on me. There was no time for a long evaluation, no time for doubt. You coming? He asked. It wasn't an order. It wasn't an expectation. It was a decision. And somehow, it felt like the most important one I had been asked to make in years. Yes, I said. We moved immediately. The climb was steeper than it looked from below. Loose dirt shifted under my boots, branches scratched against my arms, and the heat intensified with every step. The fire wasn't just behind us anymore. It was around us, not fully encircling yet, but close enough to make every second count. Stay low if the smoke gets worse, Marcus called out as we climbed. I adjusted my breathing instinctively, keeping it steady, controlled. Panic would slow us down, and we didn't have time for that. We reached a bend in the trail, and that's when I saw them. Two figures, one older, one younger, standing close together near a narrow outcrop. Their movements were frantic, uncertain as they looked for a way down that didn't exist. They're going to run the wrong direction, Lena said, her voice tense. She's right, I said, scanning the terrain quickly. There was only one viable path, but it wasn't obvious, and in a moment of panic, they wouldn't see it. I'll guide them, I said. Marcus glanced at me just for a fraction of a second, then he nodded. Do it. I stepped forward, raising my voice. Hey, stay where you are, I called out. They turned toward me immediately, fear etched across their faces. We're going to get you out, I continued, keeping my tone steady, firm. But you need to listen to me. Don't move until I tell you. The older man nodded quickly, gripping the younger one's arm. Okay. I moved closer, carefully choosing my path, avoiding loose ground and areas where the fire might spread faster. There's a narrow descent to your left, I said, pointing. It's not obvious, but it's there. You'll need to move one at a time. Slow, controlled, no running. What if the fire the younger one started? It won't reach you if you follow exactly what I say, I interrupted. Confidence. That's what they needed. Not fear. Not hesitation. Just certainty. Trust me, I added. They looked at each other, then back at me. And something shifted. Okay, the older man said. Good, I replied. We're coming to you. Behind me, I could feel Marcus and Lena positioning themselves ready to assist. But in that moment, it was my voice guiding them. My instincts leading the way. And as we closed the distance, the fire crackling louder around us, I realized something that made my chest tighten, not with fear, but with something else entirely. They were looking at me the way that rescue team had earlier. Not like I was invisible, not like I was just there, but like I was the one who knew the way out. The path down wasn't obvious. That was the problem. It never is when people panic. The two hikers stood frozen on the narrow outcrop, the fire crackling louder behind them now, wind pushing heat and sparks dangerously close. The younger one, a woman in her 20s, was breathing too fast, her chest rising and falling in short, uneven bursts. She's going to panic, Lena muttered under her breath. I know, I said quietly. And I did, because I had seen it before. People don't fall apart all at once. It starts small. Breathing gets shallow, thoughts get loud. And suddenly, the simplest decision feels impossible. If that happened here, they wouldn't make it. I stepped closer, keeping my movements slow, deliberate. "Look at me," I said, my voice firm but calm. The younger woman's eyes snapped toward mine, immediately wide with fear. "Just focus on me," I continued. "Not the fire, not the noise, just me." Her breathing didn't slow right away, but she didn't look away. That was enough. "You're going to get out of here," I said, "but you need to trust me. Can you do that?" She hesitated, just for a second. Then she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Good." I turned, slightly pointing again to the narrow descent I had spotted earlier. "It's right there," I said. "You won't see it clearly from where you're standing, but it's there. It slopes down behind those rocks. You'll go first." Her eyes flicked toward the direction I indicated, uncertainty flashing across her face. "I don't see I know," I interrupted gently. "But I do, and I need you to trust that." Behind me, I could feel Marcus watching, not stepping in, not correcting me, just letting me lead. That alone told me everything. The older man, probably in his 50s, tightened his grip on her arm. "I'll go with you," he said quickly. "No," I said, sharper this time. Both of them looked at me. "You go second," I clarified, my tone steady again. "If you both try at the same time, you'll lose balance. One at a time. Slow, controlled." He nodded immediately. "Okay." The younger woman swallowed hard, then took a small step toward the edge. "That's it," I said. "Easy." The fire crackled louder behind them. Too close. We were running out of time. "Keep your weight low," I instructed. "Use your hands. Feel for stable ground before you move your foot." She crouched slightly, her movements shaky but deliberate. "That's it?" I repeated. "You're doing fine." Step by step, she began to descend. Slow, uncertain, but moving. I stayed focused on her, blocking out everything else, the heat, the noise, the pressure building in my chest. Because if I let any of that in, I would lose the clarity she needed from me. "You're halfway there," I said after a moment. She shook her head slightly. "It doesn't feel like it." "I know," I said, "but you are. Keep going." Behind her, the older man waited, his eyes darting between her and the approaching flames. "Don't rush," I called to him. "Your turn will come." Finally, the younger woman reached the lower section of the path, a narrow but stable stretch that led away from the immediate danger. "I'm down," she called, her voice trembling but filled with relief. "Stay there," I replied. "Don't move yet." I turned my attention back to the older man. "Your turn," I said. He nodded, moving more confidently than she had, but still careful. Behind him, a sudden gust of wind sent sparks flying across the ridge. Too close. Marcus stepped forward slightly. "We need to move," he said quietly. "I know," I replied, my eyes still locked on the man descending. "Hurry," Lena called out. "I can't rush him," I said, because rushing would mean mistakes, and mistakes here would cost everything. The man slipped slightly, his foot losing traction for a split second. My heart jumped. "Stop," I said immediately. He froze. "Reset your footing," I instructed. "Find solid ground before you move again." He nodded, adjusting carefully, then continued. Finally, he reached the lower section, joining the younger woman. "They're down," Lena said, relief flooding her voice. "Good," Marcus replied. "Now we get out." But I didn't move right away, because something wasn't right. The wind shifted again, and this time it wasn't just pushing the fire closer. It was changing its direction entirely. "Marcus," I said, my voice tightening. The fire's turning. He followed my gaze, his expression hardening instantly. Damn, the path we had planned to use for descent was about to be cut off. Alternative route, Lena asked quickly. Marcus scanned the terrain, calculating. Not enough time, he said. We go straight down fast. I shook my head. That slope's unstable, I said. If we rush it, someone's going to fall. We don't have a better option. He snapped. Yes, we do, I said more firmly now. Yes, we do, I said more firmly now. Both of them looked at me. There's a secondary path, I continued. It curves west before dropping down. It's longer, but safer. Marcus frowned. You're sure I didn't hesitate? Yes. Both of them looked at me. There's a secondary path? I continued. It curves west before dropping down. It's longer, but safer. Marcus frowned. You're sure I didn't hesitate? Yes. That certainty, it came from somewhere deep, not guesswork, not hope, memory, instinct, the kind that doesn't explain itself. It just knows. For a split second, Marcus hesitated. Then, all right, he said. You lead. The words hit me like a shock. You lead. 30 years ago, that would have been normal, expected. Now it felt like something I had to rise into. Stay close, I said, turning immediately. And don't break formation? We moved quickly, cutting across the ridge toward the path I had seen earlier. The terrain shifted under our feet, loose dirt and scattered rock, making every step a calculation. Behind us, the fire surged forward, closer, louder, hungry. But I didn't look back, because I couldn't afford to. Not now. Down here, I called, guiding them toward a narrow opening between two rock formations. It was tight, easy to miss, but it led exactly where we needed to go. We descended carefully, the ground sloping more gradually than the direct path Marcus had suggested. Safer, more stable, and just far enough from the fire's new direction. When we finally reached the base, the air felt cooler, the immediate threat less suffocating. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lena let out a breath. That was the right call, she said. Marcus looked at me, not quickly, not casually, but with a kind of quiet recognition that settled deep in my chest. You didn't hesitate, he said. I met his gaze. No, I replied. And in that moment, I realized something that changed everything. Out there, in the middle of danger, uncertainty, and chaos, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just there. I was the one people trusted when it mattered most. And for the first time in decades, I believed it. We didn't stop moving until the fire was no longer breathing down our backs. Even then, it didn't feel safe. It just felt less immediate. The two hikers were escorted toward the lower clearing where additional crews had begun setting up a secondary safe zone. Medics rushed forward the moment they saw them checking vitals, wrapping blankets around their shoulders, speaking in calm, steady tones that contrasted sharply with the chaos still unfolding around us. I stayed back. Not because I wasn't needed, but because something inside me had shifted into observation again. Assessment, the way it used to be. Marcus stepped beside me, his eyes tracking the movement of his team, the fire line, the wind. You were right, he said. I glanced at him. The western path, he added. If we'd gone straight down, we would have been caught in that shift. I followed his gaze. Even from where we stood now, I could see the glow intensifying along the route we had avoided. Close, too close. It wasn't luck, I said quietly. I know, he replied. There was no hesitation in his voice, no doubt, and that still felt unfamiliar. Lena jogged over, pulling off her helmet. Her face flushed from heat and exertion. "They're okay," she said. "Shaken, but no serious injuries." "Good," Marcus said. Lena looked at me, her expression softening slightly. "You did that," she said. I shook my head instinctively. "We all did." "No," she said gently. "They followed you." The words landed deeper than I expected, because she wasn't wrong. And that realization, it stirred something complicated inside me. Before I could respond, a radio crackled sharply at Marcus's shoulder. "Command to hail! We've got a new problem." Marcus grabbed the radio immediately. "Go ahead. There's a residential pocket about 2 miles west. Fire's moving faster than predicted. We've got limited personnel out there. They're requesting immediate support." Marcus's jaw tightened. "How many homes?" he asked. "Estimated 6 to 8. Evacuation's incomplete." That changed everything. Homes, families, people who didn't even know yet how close the danger was. Marcus didn't waste another second. "We're en route," he said into the radio. He turned to Lena. "Grab whoever's ready. We move now." Then his eyes shifted to me. There was no long pause this time. No careful evaluation. Just a decision. "You're with us," he said. Not a question. Not even a suggestion. Just fact. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to ask why. We moved fast, back into the truck's engines roaring to life as teams organized themselves in seconds. I climbed into the back seat beside Lena, the adrenaline from earlier still coursing through me, but steadier now. Controlled, focused. As we sped down a narrow dirt road, the world outside the window blurred into streaks of darkness and intermittent firelight. "How far?" Lena asked. 10 minutes if the road holds," the driver replied. If she echoed, that word hung in the air, because nothing about tonight was certain. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes scanning the terrain as best as I could from inside the vehicle. Then I saw it. Smoke. Not just distant anymore. Closer. Thicker. "We're going to hit it before we reach them," I said. Marcus glanced back at me. "You think so? I know so." He didn't argue. "All right," he said. "We adjust on arrival." The truck slowed as we approached a bend in the road, and suddenly the situation became clear. Flames had already crossed part of the path. Not a full blockade, but enough to slow us down. Enough to cost time we didn't have. "Damn it," Lena muttered. Marcus was already thinking. "Can we push through?" he asked the driver. Maybe the driver replied. "But it's risky." I watched the flames carefully, the way they moved, the way the wind fed them. Then I made a decision. "There's another way," I said. Marcus turned to me again. "You've been here before?" he asked. "No," I said. "But the terrain, it's sloping downward on the left side. There should be a service path or runoff trail. It won't be O-path or runoff trail. It won't be amphibious, but it'll be there." Lena leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. "I think she's right," she said. "There's a barrique in the brush about 50 yards back. Devious, but it'll be there." Lena leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. "I think she's right," she said. "There's a break in the brush about 50 yards back." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Back it up," he ordered. The truck reversed quickly, then veered off the main path, pushing through a narrow opening that barely looked like a road. Branches scraped against the sides of the vehicle. The ground dipped unevenly beneath us, but it held. And within moments, we were moving again, faster than before. "You just saved us at least 5 minutes," Lena said, glancing at me. 5 minutes. Out here. That could mean everything. When we finally reached the residential pocket, the scene was worse than I expected. A cluster of homes sat scattered along the edge of the forest, small, isolated properties with narrow driveways and minimal protection against the approaching fire. And the fire. It was close. Too close. One house already had flames licking at the outer fence line. People were outside, some packing hurriedly, others frozen, unsure of what to do. "Go!" Marcus shouted as the truck came to a stop. We jumped out the heat, hitting us immediately. "Split up," he continued. "Evacuate first, contain if possible." Lena grabbed my arm briefly. "Stick with me." I nodded. We moved toward the nearest house where an older couple stood arguing in the driveway. "We don't have time for this," the man was saying. "We can still save some things." "No." Lena cut in sharply. "You need to leave, now." They both turned toward her, startled. "The fire is moving this direction," she continued. "You don't have time to pack. You need to get in your car and go." They hesitated. Fear, denial. I stepped forward. "Listen to her," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You can't outrun this if you wait too long. Your safety is what matters." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "But our home—" "You can rebuild a home," I said softly. "You can't replace your life." "That did it," she nodded, grabbing her husband's arm. "Let's go," she said. They moved quickly after that. We turned to the next house, and the next. Each one a different reaction. Fear, resistance, confusion. But every time the same truth applied. They needed direction, clarity, someone to tell them what to do when they couldn't think straight. And without realizing it, that someone had become me. As the last car pulled away from the area, I stood in the middle of the road, watching the flames creep closer, consuming everything in their path. And for the first time since I had left my house that night, as the last car pulled away from the area, I stood in the middle of the road, watching the flames creep closer, consuming everything in their path. And for the first time since I had left my house that night, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I had found. Because out here, in the middle of danger and uncertainty, I wasn't just surviving. I was needed. The fire didn't slow down. If anything, it grew hungrier. Even after the last family had driven away, their taillights disappearing into the darkness, the flames kept advancing, crawling up fences, devouring dry grass, licking at the edges of porches, like something testing its limits. We weren't done, not even close. "Containment line here," Marcus shouted, pointing toward a strip of land between two houses. "If we can hold it at this gap, we might save the rest." The team moved instantly, grabbing tools, hoses, whatever they could carry. I followed without thinking, because standing still wasn't an option anymore. Not here. Not tonight. Lena handed me a tool, a Pulaski. I realized the weight of it familiar in my hands. "Clear everything you can," she said. "We need bare ground." I nodded, already moving. The rhythm came back faster than I expected. Swing, break, clear, again and again. The ground was dry, stubborn, but it gave way under repeated force. Sweat mixed with soot on my skin, my breathing heavy but controlled. Around me, others worked in sink digging, cutting, spraying water where flames crept too close. For a moment, it almost felt like we had control. Almost. Then the wind shifted again. Stronger this time. A sudden gust that carried embers farther than before. One landed just beyond the line we were building. Then another. "Spot fire," someone yelled. I turned sharply, spotting the small flame catching in a patch of dry brush near the side of a house. Too close. If it spread, I didn't wait. I ran. The heat intensified with every step, the air thick and hard to breathe, but I pushed through it, dropping to my knees as I reached the flame. I swung the tool down hard, breaking apart the burning material, smothering it with dirt. Again, until the flame died. But as I stood catching my breath, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The house. Not the one we were protecting. The one just beyond it. Smoke was seeping from under the eaves. "Marcus," I shouted, pointing. "That house, it's already catching." He turned immediately, following my line of sight. "Damn it," he muttered. "Evacuated?" Lena asked quickly. Marcus hesitated. "Not sure." That was all I needed to hear. Because not sure meant one thing. Someone could still be inside. "I'm checking," I said, already moving. "Austin, wait," Lena called after me. But I didn't stop. Because I couldn't. Not when there was even a chance. The front door was partially open, smoke curling out into the night air. I pulled my sleeve over my mouth instinctively and stepped inside. The heat hit me immediately. Thicker, heavier, different from outside. Inside, it trapped itself, building in waves. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cutting through the haze. "Is anyone here?" No answer. Just the faint crackling of something burning deeper inside the house. I moved forward cautiously, my eyes scanning every corner, every doorway. Living room empty, kitchen clear. But the smoke was stronger toward the back. Bedrooms. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. Then a sound. Faint. Barely there. A cough. My heart jumped. "Where are you?" I shouted. Another cough, slightly clearer this time. Back room. I moved quickly now, pushing through the smoke, my eyes stinging my lungs, protesting. The hallway felt longer than it should have. Narrower. Hotter. Finally, I reached the last door. I pushed it open. And there, a woman. Older, maybe in her 70s, sitting on the edge of the bed, disoriented, clutching her chest as she struggled to breathe. "Oh, thank God," she rasped when she saw me. "We need to get you out," I said, immediately moving to her side. I couldn't find my inhaler," she said weakly. "It's okay," she said weakly. "It's okay," I replied, helping her to her feet. "We're leaving now." She leaned heavily on me, her weight fragile but unsteady. The smoke thickened behind us. Time was gone. We had seconds. "Stay with me," plied, helping her to her feet. "We're leaving now." She leaned heavily on me, her weight fragile but unsteady. The smoke thickened behind us. Time was gone. We had seconds. "Stay with me," I said, guiding her toward the door. Each step felt slower than it should have. The heat pressed in harder, the air grew thinner, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because this was what mattered. Not the house, not the fire, her. Finally, we reached the front door. Fresh air hit us like a shock as we stumbled outside. Hands were there immediately, Lena, Marcus, others, taking her from me, lowering her gently to the ground. "She needs oxygen," Lena called out. A medic rushed forward. I stepped back, my chest heaving, my lungs burning from the smoke. Marcus approached, his expression sharper than I had ever seen it. "You went in alone," he said. It wasn't a question. "No time to wait," I replied. His jaw tightened. For a second, I thought he was going to argue, or reprimand me. But then he looked past me to the woman now breathing through an oxygen mask. Alive, and something in his expression shifted. "Next time," he said quietly, "you call it in first." I nodded. Next time, I agreed. Because we both knew there would be a next time. Lena stepped beside me, her eyes searching my face. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, though my throat still burned. I'm fine. She exhaled slowly, shaking her head. You're not just fine, Austin, she said. You just ran into a burning house and pulled someone out. I didn't know how to respond to that, because to me, it hadn't felt extraordinary. It had felt necessary. Marcus looked at me again, something deeper in his gaze now. Not just respect, something closer to certainty. You weren't trained halfway, he said. I met his eyes. No, I replied, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain the rest. Because out here in the fire, in the chaos, in the choices that mattered most, they already knew. The fire didn't care that we had saved people. It didn't care that homes had been evacuated or that one life had just been pulled from the edge of something irreversible. It kept moving, relentless, unforgiving, and now it was closing in from two directions. We're losing the west side! Eric's voice came through the radio sharp with urgency. Wind's pushing it faster than we can hold. Marcus grabbed the radio immediately. Fall back to the secondary line, he ordered. Don't get trapped trying to hold it. I turned, following his line of sight, and for the first time that night, I saw something that made my stomach tighten in a different way. Not just danger, but scale. The fire wasn't just a line anymore. It was spreading outward, splitting, advancing in uneven waves that made prediction harder with every second. We can't hold all of it, Lena said quietly beside me. No, Marcus agreed. So we protect what we can. The words were practical, necessary, but they carried weight, because what we can also meant what we couldn't. Another house caught fire behind us, flames climbing up the siding with terrifying speed. There was no stopping that one. We all knew it. Pull back, Marcus called out. We moved again, retreating toward a safer distance, regrouping near a patch of cleared land that served as our new line of defense. My arms ached. My throat burned, but I barely noticed, because something else had begun to rise inside me. Not fear, not exhaustion, something sharper, clearer. Awareness. I watched the fire carefully, the way it moved along the ground, the way the wind shifted its direction, the way certain areas ignited faster than others. And then I saw it. Marcus, I said, stepping closer to him. The fire's following the dry channel. He looked at me. What I pointed toward a shallow dip in the land, a natural runoff path barely visible unless you knew what to look for. It's feeding through there, I continued. That's why it's spreading unevenly. It's using the terrain. Lena leaned in, squinting. Yeah, I see it, she said slowly. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he studied it more closely. If we cut it off there, he murmured. We can slow it, I finished. Not stop it, but slow it. And right now, that was enough. Marcus didn't hesitate. All right, he called out. New line along that channel. Move. The team shifted immediately, redirecting their efforts toward the area I had pointed out. I moved with them, my mind already working through what needed to be done. Clear the brush, create space, starve the fire of fuel. It wasn't complicated, but it required precision and timing. We spread out, working fast, cutting away dry vegetation, digging into the soil, doing everything we could to break the fire's path. For a moment, it felt like we were catching up, like we had found a rhythm. Then the wind changed again, stronger, hotter. A sudden roar filled the air as flames surged forward, racing toward the very line we were trying to build. Faster, Lena shouted. I'm going as fast as I can, Eric snapped back. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough when the fire decided to push harder. I stepped back slightly, my eyes scanning the terrain again. Thinking, calculating, there had to be something else, something we were missing. And then, it hit me. Water, I said suddenly. Marcus turned. We need to redirect water into the channel, I continued. Not just spray, redirect it. Flood the base. Slow the spread from underneath. Lena blinked. You mean create a barrier? Yes, I said. The ground will hold it just long enough to weaken the fire's advance. Marcus didn't even question it. Do it, he ordered. Within seconds, hoses were repositioned, angles adjusted, streams of water redirected into the shallow channel. At first, nothing happened. The water soaked into the dry earth, disappearing almost instantly. But then, the ground darkened, softened, changed, and when the flames reached that section, they hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. Keep it going, Marcus shouted. We pushed harder, reinforcing the line, using every second we had gained to strengthen the barrier. And slowly, the fire began to shift again, not stopped, but redirected, away from the remaining houses, away from the path we were protecting. A collective breath seemed to move through the team. Not relief, not yet, but something close. We're holding it, Lena said, disbelief and hope mixing in her voice. For now, Marcus replied. But his tone had changed. There was something in it now that hadn't been there before. Confidence. I stepped back, my chest rising and falling as I watched the flames adjust their course. And for a moment, everything went quiet inside me. Not the world, not the fire, but me. Because I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think until now. I wasn't just helping. I wasn't just keeping up. I was leading decisions that mattered, decisions that were changing outcomes. Lives, homes, futures. Marcus walked over to me, his expression steady, but his eyes different. You saw that before anyone else, he said. I shrugged slightly. It made sense. No, he said. It didn't just make sense. You read the situation. I didn't respond right away. Because part of me still struggled to accept that, to believe it fully. But another part, the part that had been buried for years, knew it was true. Before I could say anything else, the radio crackled again. Command to all units. Fire's beginning to stabilize on the west side. Continue holding positions. Lena let out a breath. That's the first good news we've had all night, she said. Marcus nodded. Doesn't mean we're done, he replied. But it means we've got a chance. A chance. That was all anyone had been fighting for. And somehow, I had become part of the reason it existed. As I stood there watching the fire pull back just enough to give us space, I felt something shift inside me again. But this time, it wasn't just about the moment. It wasn't just about proving something. It was about understanding something deeper. All those years I had been told I didn't matter. All those years I had believed it. They didn't erase who I was. They didn't take away what I could do. They just buried it. And tonight, in the fire, in the chaos, in the choices that mattered most, I had found it again. Not as a memory, but as something real, something undeniable. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take it away. By the time the fire finally began to lose its momentum, the sky had already started to change. Not fully morning yet, but no longer night. A faint gray light stretched across the horizon, softening the harsh edges of everything that had felt so sharp and unforgiving just hours before. Smoke still lingered in the air. Ash drifted down like quiet reminders of what had almost been lost. But the fire, it was no longer in control. "We're holding," Marcus said into his radio, his voice steady but quieter now. "Containment lines are stable on all sides." There was a pause, then a response crackled back. "Copy that. Good work, Hale. Good work." The same words he had said to me earlier, but now they belonged to all of us. Lena dropped down onto a low rock nearby, pulling off her gloves with a tired exhale. "I don't think I've ever been this exhausted," she admitted. I sat down. "Beast exhausted," she admitted. I sat down, Bessie Day her slowly, my body finally beginning to register everything it had been through. The ache in my arms, the dryness in my throat, the heaviness behind my eyes. And yet eyed her slowly, my body finally beginning to register everything it had been through. The ache in my arms, the dryness in my throat, the heaviness behind my eyes. And yet, underneath all of that, there was something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the quiet kind that comes from routine or safety, but the kind that comes from knowing you did something that mattered. "You held up better than most first-timers," Lena said, glancing at me with a small, tired smile. I let out a soft breath. "I don't feel like a first-timer." She studied me for a moment. "Yeah," she said. "I can tell." A few feet away, Marcus stood with Eric reviewing something on a tablet, their conversation low but focused. Every now and then, Marcus glanced in my direction. Not casually, not absent-mindedly, but like he was still thinking about something. Finally, he walked over. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I'm all right," I replied. He nodded once, then gestured toward the area around us. The partially burned ground, the houses that had survived the ones that hadn't. "You understand what happened out there?" he asked. I followed his gaze. "Yes," I said quietly. "We didn't win. We just held the line." He gave a small, approving nod. "That's exactly right." There was a pause. Then, "You made decisions tonight that most people wouldn't have even seen," he said. I didn't answer right away, because part of me still struggled to accept that, to fully step into it. "I just did what needed to be done," I said finally. Marcus shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "A lot of people were here tonight. They all worked hard, but not all of them saw what you saw." His voice lowered just slightly, "And not all of them would have acted on it." That silence stretched between us for a moment. Not uncomfortable, but heavy, because I knew what he was saying, even if I wasn't ready to say it myself. Before I could respond, Lena stood up suddenly. "You might want to see this," she said, holding out her phone. Marcus took a step closer. I followed. On the screen was a video clip shaky, taken from a distance. The fire, the houses, and me, guiding the two hikers down the ridge. Then another clip, the evacuation, my voice steady telling people to leave. And then, the moment I came out of the burning house, helping the older woman to safety. My breath caught slightly. "I didn't know anyone was filming," I said. "Someone always is," Lena replied. Marcus's expression darkened just a fraction. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "It's already online," Lena said. "Local news picked it up. They're calling it the woman who led rescues before crews could reach." I stared at the screen, at myself, moving through the chaos like it was something familiar, something I belonged in. "That's not—" I started, but I didn't finish, because I didn't know what to say. It wasn't wrong, but it didn't feel like the whole truth either. Marcus handed the phone back to Lena. "This is going to spread," he said quietly. She nodded. "Already is." And suddenly, something shifted. Not in the fire, not in the team, but in me. Because for the first time, the world outside of this night was starting to catch up to what had happened here. And that meant my past wasn't buried anymore. My story wasn't hidden anymore. And somewhere, people who had never seen me clearly before were about to. Almost as if on cue, my phone forgotten in my jacket pocket vibrated. Once, then again, and again. I froze because I already knew who it was. I didn't need to look. I didn't need confirmation. I just knew. Slowly, I pulled it out. Missed calls, messages, all from the same 3 names. Richard, Daniel, Emily. They had seen it. Of course they had. The silence around me felt different now. Heavier, charged. Lena glanced at the screen, then back at me. "You going to answer?" she asked gently. I stared at the names, at the life I had left behind just hours ago. The life that had never really seen me. Not like this. Not fully. Marcus didn't say anything. He just watched. Waiting. Not for my explanation, not for my justification, but for my decision. And in that moment, I realized something that made everything clearer than it had ever been. For years, I had been waiting for them to see me, to recognize my worth, to tell me I mattered. But now, that didn't feel as important anymore, because I had already proven it. Not to them, but to myself. I let the phone go dark in my hand, not answering, not yet. Lena didn't push. Marcus didn't question. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next, because whatever it was, it would be on my terms. I didn't answer the messages that morning. Not when the sun finally rose over the charred hills. Not when the crews began packing up equipment, their movements slower now, heavier with exhaustion. Not even when Lena gently nudged my arm and said, "You might want to check those eventually." Eventually. That word felt right. Because for once in my life, I wasn't rushing to meet someone else's expectations. I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. It wasn't until late afternoon, after the fire had been fully contained and the teams had begun rotating out, that I finally found a quiet moment alone. I sat on the tailgate of one of the trucks, the world around me calmer now, though still carrying the weight of everything that had happened. My phone felt heavier in my hands than it should have. I stared at the screen for a long time before unlocking it. Dozens of messages, missed calls, voicemails, all from the same 3 names. Richard, Daniel, Emily. I opened the first message. Richard, Austin. "Where are you? I just saw something on the news. Call me immediately." The next one came minutes later. "This isn't funny. You need to come home." I let out a slow breath. Even now, that tone, control, expectation, not concern, not at first. Then Daniel. "Mom, is that really you in the video? What are you doing out there? And then we've been trying to reach you. This is serious, serious." As if everything I had just done, everything I had just been through, needed to be filtered through their definition of importance. Emily's messages were different. "Saw the video. Are you okay?" Then, "I didn't know you could do things like that." And finally, "Mom, why didn't you ever tell us?" That one stopped me, because it was the only question that mattered. Why didn't you ever tell us? I stared at those words, something tight forming in my chest. Because the answer wasn't simple. It wasn't just one moment, one decision. It was years, years of being unheard, of trying to speak and being dismissed, of slowly learning that it was easier to stay quiet. But sitting there now, after everything that had happened, I realized something I hadn't before. It wasn't just that they hadn't listened. It was that I had stopped speaking. And that was something I could change. The phone rang, suddenly pulling me out of my thoughts. Richard. I stared at the screen as it buzzed in my hand. For a moment, I considered ignoring it again, but something inside me shifted. Not fear, not obligation, just readiness. I answered. Austin. His voice came through immediately sharp, controlled. Where are you? I didn't respond right away, because I wasn't going to answer that question the way I always had. I'm safe, I said instead. A pause. That's not what I asked, he replied. I almost smiled. Of course it wasn't, but that didn't matter anymore. It's what I'm telling you, I said calmly. Another pause, longer this time. What are you doing out there? He asked, his tone shifting slightly, less controlled, more uncertain. I looked out at the land around me. The blackened ground, the smoke still rising faintly in the distance, the people moving quietly as they finished their work. I'm doing something that matters, I said. The silence on the other end was immediate, heavy. You've always had something that matters here, he said finally. Your home, your family. There it was, the same argument, the same definition, the same box he had always placed me in. I took a slow breath. My life doesn't only exist inside that house, Richard, I said. Another silence. Then, that's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, I replied gently. Not angry, not bitter, just clear. For the first time, I wasn't trying to make him understand. I was simply telling the truth. I saw the video, he said after a moment. You were risking your life. Yes. Why? The question hung there, not accusatory, not entirely, but confused, as if he couldn't understand why I would choose something like that. And for years, I wouldn't have been able to explain it either, but now it was simple. Because I can, I said. The words surprised even me, but they felt right, complete. You can, he repeated. Yes, I said, because I know how, because I was trained, because this is something I was good at long before I ever became just someone who keeps things running. The line went quiet, completely. And for the first time, he didn't interrupt. He didn't correct me. He didn't dismiss what I was saying. He just listened. I didn't know, he said finally. I closed my eyes briefly. I know, I replied. Another pause. Then, come home, he said, but this time it sounded different, less like an order, more like a request. I opened my eyes, looking out at the horizon, at everything I had found here, at everything I had remembered, and everything I wasn't willing to lose again. I'm not ready to come back, I said. The words settled between us. Final, not harsh, not emotional, just true. I need time, I continued, to figure out what my life looks like now. Austin. I'm not disappearing, I said, cutting him off gently. But I'm also not going back to the way things were. Silence again. But this time, it felt different. Not tense, not filled with resistance, just uncertain, and maybe, For the first time, so was he. "I'll call you," I said, "when I'm ready." I ended the call before he could respond, not out of anger, but because I didn't need to explain anything else. Not right now. As I lowered the phone, I realized something that made my chest feel lighter than it had in years. I hadn't argued. I hadn't defended myself. I hadn't tried to prove anything. I had simply chosen, and that choice, that was something no one could take from me. I didn't go back home the next day, or the day after that. Instead, I stayed. At first, it was practical. The team needed help with cleanup assessment and monitoring the area for flare-ups. The fire might have been contained, but it wasn't gone. Not completely. It still required watchful eyes, experienced judgment, and steady hands. And somehow, without anyone formally asking, I had become part of that. Austin Lena called one morning as I was helping organize supplies. "You're going to keep pretending you're not officially one of us?" I looked up, a faint smile tugging at my lips. "I never said that." "No," she said, crossing her arms. "But you also haven't said you are." She had a point, because there was still a part of me that hesitated. Not because I doubted myself anymore, but because I was still letting go of who I used to be. Marcus approached, overhearing just enough of the conversation to understand. "You don't need a title to belong here," he said simply. I met his eyes. "I know," and yet he added, "You're still standing halfway in." I let out a slow breath. Because he wasn't wrong either. For years, I had lived in a space where I didn't fully belong, where I adjusted myself to fit into something smaller, quieter, less visible. And now, even though I had stepped out of that, a part of me was still learning how to stand fully in something new. I think I started, then paused, choosing my words carefully. I think I'm still getting used to the idea that I don't have to shrink anymore. Lena's expression softened. "Then don't," she said gently. "It's not that easy," I replied. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "No," he said, "it's not, but it's simple." I raised an eyebrow. "There's a difference," he added. And somehow, that made sense. That afternoon, I finally did something I had been avoiding. I called Emily. She answered on the second ring. "Mom?" Her voice was tentative, uncertain. "It's me," I said. There was a pause. Then I saw everything she said. I sat down on a nearby bench, the weight of that statement settling in. "I figured you did." I didn't know she began, then stopped. I waited. Because this time, I wasn't going to fill the silence for her. "I didn't know you were that strong," she said finally. I let out a soft breath. "I didn't know you needed me to be," I replied. Another silence. But not uncomfortable, just honest. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" she asked again, her voice quieter this time. I thought about that. About all the years, all the moments, all the times I had tried and stopped trying. Because every time I did, I said slowly, it felt like it didn't matter. She didn't respond right away. And for a moment, I wondered if I had said too much. "Then, I'm sorry," she said. The words were soft, but they carried something real, something I hadn't heard before. "I think," she continued, her voice wavering slightly, "I think we got used to seeing you one way, and we never questioned it." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "That happens," I said. "But it shouldn't have," she added quickly. "No, it shouldn't have, but I didn't need to say that. I'm not the same person I was before," I said instead. "I know," she replied, and for the first time, it didn't sound like a criticism. It sounded like acceptance. "Are you coming back?" she asked. The question lingered between us. Not heavy, not demanding, just open. "Yes," I said after a moment, "but not to the same life." I heard her exhale softly. "Okay," she said, and that was enough. When I ended the call, I felt something settle inside me. Not closure, not completely, but a beginning. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned shades of gold and orange, I stood at the edge of the burned land, looking out over everything that had changed. Not just the landscape, but me. Marcus joined me, standing quietly beside me for a moment. "You've got a choice to make," he said eventually. "I know. You can go back," he continued, "or you can stay, or you can find something in between." I smiled slightly. "You make it sound simple." "It is," he said. "Not easy, but simple. That distinction, again." I looked out at the horizon, the faint outline of trees that had survived the quiet resilience of everything that hadn't been taken. "I think," I said slowly, "I spent too many years waiting for someone else to tell me who I was." Marcus didn't interrupt. "I don't want to do that anymore," I added. He nodded once. "Then don't." I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. And for the first time, the path ahead didn't feel uncertain. It felt open. Not defined by expectations, not shaped by limitations, but built on something I had rediscovered for myself. Strength, clarity, purpose. "I'm not done here," I said finally. Marcus glanced at me. "I didn't think you were." And as the last light of the day faded into night, I realized something that stayed with me long after the fire was gone. My family had spent years making me feel like I didn't matter. Like I was invisible. Like I was replaceable. But out here, in the middle of chaos, danger, and uncertainty, a team of strangers had looked at me and seen something entirely different. They didn't just see me. They trusted me. They followed me. They called me their greatest teacher. And now, for the first time in my life, I finally understood why. After everything that happened, I realized something that took me decades to understand. Sometimes, the world doesn't fail to see your worth. You just end up in places that were never built to recognize it. For years, I believed I didn't matter, because the people closest to me treated me that way. I shrank myself to fit into their expectations. I stopped speaking up. I stopped showing what I was capable of. And slowly, I started believing the version of me they saw instead of the truth I had buried. But life has a way of putting you exactly where you need to be sometimes, through chaos, through pain, through moments that force you to remember who you are. That night didn't give me new strength. It revealed the strength I had always had. And maybe that's the lesson I want to leave you with. It's never too late to rediscover yourself. It's never too late to step into a version of your life that actually reflects your value. And most importantly, your worth is not defined by the people who failed to see it. It's defined by what you do when it finally matters. If this story touched you in any way, I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever felt unseen or undervalued by the people closest to you? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I always read your comments, and if you believe in stories about second chances, quiet strength, and finding your true place in the world, don't forget to like and subscribe. You never know which story might remind you of your own. There comes a moment in life, sometimes late, sometimes after years of silence, when you finally realize that being unseen does not mean realize that being unseen does not mean you are unworthy. It only means you have been standing in rooms that never learned how to recognize your light. For so long, many of us shrink ourselves to fit expectations. We become quieter, smaller, more acceptable. You are unworthy. It only means you have been standing in rooms that never learned how to recognize your light. For so long, many of us shrink ourselves to fit expectations. We become quieter, smaller, more acceptable, hoping that one day someone will notice our value. But the truth is, your worth has never depended on someone else's ability to see it. It lives in what you carry quietly, in the strength you don't talk about, in the choices you make when things get hard, in the courage to step forward when no one is watching. And sometimes, life will take everything familiar away, not to break you, but to reveal you, to remind you of who you were before the world told you who to be. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever questioned your place in your own family, your own life, I want you to remember this. It is never too late to reclaim yourself. Not loudly, not dramatically, but truthfully. Because the moment you begin to see your own value, everything changes. If this story touched your heart, I'd truly love to hear from you. Have you ever felt overlooked or underestimated in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read every message, and if you believe in stories about strength, second chances, and finding your true self, don't forget to like and subscribe. You never know which story might feel like it was written just for you.